would make you feel more comfortable with being able to implement it more broadly in the future across the county, and this and that and those type things. So it is a law right now. So it's really, you know, it is a law. So, and that impacts on the petition. So if a law is invalid, any subsequent petition ain't going to work. It's not going to work, because if you pass it, you set a precedent, and then when he walks in two years from now, wanting to save your observatory, your hands are tied because you set a precedent. And that's a difficult thing to change. It's like sort of like getting married. It's easy to do, difficult to get out of. So the actions that I've given to you are to take a look at it, and as the law is being rewritten to make it better or more compatible with what you feel comfortable with, is to ensure everybody's that's got a real dog in the fight at the state level, at the local level, at the county level, and at the local level. And that's it. Planning has to be integrated vertically and horizontally. I mean, neither one of these happened. I mean, that vertical integration. I mean, here's a classic case where we know that this is going to be suitable for a RAD, and they just redid the railroads, I guess. Now there's this railroad system up here. Cass is now part of a railroad system or something like that. Or you've got Durban or places like that in the future. So I think it's that looking out. My recommendations are, take a look at it, figure out what you feel comfortable with, send it back, and say, hey, here's what we have concerns about. Even more importantly, we have concerns about, we want to see it again before it comes screaming out of Charleston.
Any other questions?
So in summary, a RAD is not a bad thing. A RAD can be really good for this county. And I applaud the initiative of Interwest and Fortress and bringing it out in the forefront. Now that we're aware of it, it will be a working together to assist. And I personally I'd be more than happy to help pro bono. Holly wants me to find something to do now that I'm retired. This has been terrible for him there. So, and I'd be more than happy to assist in whatever. And I would ask you this: I believe myself to be an objective person in this, and if there's an empirical or rational way to look at it, that's academically, and you know, if it walks like it, it's got feathers and it quacks, it's a duck. I mean, as much as we all like a peacock, it's a duck right now. We can make a peacock out of it.
Any other questions?
I'd like to hear some comments from some of the people here.
I want to be one to do that.
Okay.
Bill Beard, Jamie, I appreciate you guys. You all dodged a bullet. Everything I hear today tells me just how bad that bullet, what that was going to do. You had the sense to know that you don't jump on something like this big time. That's the first thing. The second thing is, let's be sure to ask about all these RADs. I did the research last night, and there are not all these RADs around. In fact, there might be 2 or 3 of them. Big Sky, Montana is the best example of it. It's I couldn't find any negatives for Big Sky, but this does not have a large base across the United States. You can't find a lot of research material on it, so you need to be careful about that. The third thing, I guess, would be that you being involved in the Pocahontas County Concerned Citizens anti-zoning group, you are really making it scary now with this proposal. It might sound like it was the best thing to involve everybody. Just like this levy we had, they were going to give a few dollars to everybody. Everybody gets to buy in. Well, I want to warn you that some of us were scared enough about snowshoeing. We didn't own a dime's worth of property up there getting a RAD. Now, I really like the idea that they took the ranger program out. If there was anything that should have killed that right on the spot, was the private police force. And I really appreciate you guys going down on that. I talked to people and they said, you mean to tell me that they were going to have a private police force up there on that mountain? Man, we have already had enough problem with public police. We definitely don't need private police anymore. So this is a really good thing to take the Ranger program out. So thank you all very much. Beware in the future. Don't jump on stuff just immediately. Thank you.
Mr. Litzy?
Mr. Fleming, when I had an opportunity to do some of the printing for this, I obviously got to read a lot of the material. One of the most salient characteristics of this proposal, and I think of one of the most important things for a board such as yourself, is that this proposal includes the general electorate, the people who vote. Nobody is excluded in this, so that in a situation like Snowshoe, where you want to create an additional stream of income to support the kinds of activities that you'd like to have there, and the seasonal influx which put on a disproportionate charge onto public utilities like sewer and water and roads and snow plowing. So you want to come up with a way to supplement that, and the piggyback sales tax seems to be a way that you could certainly go about doing that. The other part of it is that everybody votes, that all qualified citizens that reside in whatever area that you are anticipating have a chance to vote on whether or not they want to go into something like this, and to get very specific in the plan of what's going to go into that piggyback sales tax. Is it going to be stuff that I need to buy for my children to feed them? Or is it going to be what they did in Wisconsin, luxury items? Big Sky, Montana is a huge district, and they had essentially a piggyback sales tax on a lot of different things, and they used it to support the fire department and the emergency response and water and sewer and all kinds of things. All of those things were great, but they included everybody. Everybody got a chance to vote, and the boards of governors for those things were elected either as part of the natural election process or by the general electorate. There weren't a lot of other examples. So if we go into something at the state level, one of the things that I would see as supremely important is going to the Attorney General's office and saying, hey, help us with this tax stuff. How should this tax stuff be structured? And who should be able to participate in these votes? Because to me, and there are a lot of people that disagree with me, to me it's settled law, settled constitutional law. But other people may disagree. Well, I think that the Attorney General, who's offered his services for free, ought to be consulted in this. And then we rework a plan and bring it to our state legislators, and say this is what we'd like to see move forward. And I think, from what I understand in talking to state legislators, that there are a lot of them that were left out that would like to have a part in the process.
Any other comments?
Bill,
Sir?
so truly,
What?
Sam Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
So truly,
I'm not talking to you till I get my free wings at Misty's.
so truly, what you have that you remove the assessments, you remove the borrowing, and what you really have is what Mr. Litz said, is really a piggyback tax.
Not necessarily so, you know, I found some rads that were able to sell bonds, and they were able to do this, and they were able to do that. And so I think it's a level of comfort. Of course, this was a huge, thing. And so the recommendations are just that. Those are recommendations, and a lot of them are just low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's like shooting something wounded. I mean, they were so evident and so easy, but once again, I think as the group comes together, this vertical planning, nothing should be off limits. You can use this as a baseline and then zero base it, and then take a look at it. But the important thing is make sure everybody, and you're looking at it from all these different perspectives.
Right.
Can you do this? Is it able? Well, the legislation as written now, no. But somewhere, and by the way, sir, I've got this book that evaluates about 15 rads, so I'll provide that to you so you can use that as benchmarks. So I don't. The answer to my question is I don't know.
Right. So who would
In the brief, you saw a recommendation about where you had all the stakeholders, and you do it incrementally. If you look at the planning process, you have strategy and policy, and then you have down here local implementation, and then you do this, and you're bouncing back and forth, and everybody on this vertical tree, from state to county to local, plays a specific role in that planning process.
Right. So who would collect, right now, the county, under the current RAD proposal, the county collects the resort area fee that they call. So if you're truly piggyback tax, so the state would end up collecting that? Is that what we?
Well, I believe it's premature to speak of that because that's a detail that will emerge in the planning process. So it's really moot point what's in the RAD now in a legislation. If it's going to be reviewed in its totality, and we could sit here, and talk about each of these individual things. As a business owner, you would be included in the process of the planning. And then when it comes to deal with legislation, you not only present what 85% of the people liked, you also present what 15% didn't like it, so the guy reading it understands both sides of it. So it's not one of these, welcome to McDonald's, here's your number one.
Right. Now, I have spoken. There's a newly formed group at the state level called West Virginia Communities Association that's been formed to represent homeowners association, to have an association for the associations, the planned communities. So I've talked to them. I've talked to people in the Eastern Panhandle HOA Association. They've really formed a strong group up there, and other large associations within the state that are part of other resort areas. Their whole heartache with the RAD proposal was a lot of them didn't even know about it. Okay, but their biggest things was the assessments and the borrowing. That was the two things. There was hardly anybody that had any heartache over a resort area fee, or call what you want to, a tax. Okay. So I think that you would get all kinds of support if the assessment and the borrowing was out of the RAD. I don't think you would have as many people anti-RAD.
If I may just want to throw, whatever you believe is to look at this globally, and you're responsible for the whole county. And in the future, that whole county. So it's looking into the future and lobbying for an instrument that will give your successors the ability then to do the right thing for small communities that have the ability to generate revenue that will help them greatly.
Mr. Willis, you have a question?
Yeah, I think originally Frank had mentioned that there was about $700,000, if I'm right, ballpark, that was going to be generated by this. Is that right, Frank?
At a 2% resort service fee, $700,000.
As as somebody that's one of the very few people that is a private business owner up there, probably one of two maybe. I don't think $700,000 is going to go very far up there. And I would actually like to see the 2% also included on alcohol sales myself, because I think that if we had double that or triple that, we could actually really do some improvements up there. And I think $700,000, by the time you have a staff, which I'm assuming is not snowshoe staff, it's a private staff, that, as you all well know, because you run a business here called Courthouse in the county, that a third of that would probably end up going to insurance and staffing, and in the end, there would only be half or less, or 2/3, somewhere in that zone of available funds to actually do some things. And I think that a bigger dollar amount would go further up there. And I, as somebody that was really never formally asked about this from the very beginning, I just heard bits and pieces of it through time. I think that if the homeowners and businesses like myself, if we're the bulk of the majority up there, we should also have the majority of the votes on the advisory board to make these decisions on where the money's spent. I don't think giving Snowshoe the majority, and even near the majority, is good faith on their part. I think that all these years, 40 years of Snowshoe, 41, the homeowners up there have really never had any kind of majority of anything except a lot of bills. And not that it doesn't require a lot of money to run a resort, but I would really like to see, for once, that the homeowners have a vote and also have a majority of where the money's spent. I think it's just fair.
And if I could dovetail on that, as you saw one of the recommendations, and it's just a recommendation, it's a going-in position, but assess tax value. And that's really, you can't change that. So if somebody's paying 70% and somebody's paying 30%, okay. If somebody's paying 82% and somebody's paying 18%, that changes that also. But once again, it's just a recommendation.
So this is the first time I'm seeing any of the information, so I'm trying to digest all of it. We have been inclusive for 3 years, right? And for anyone to suggest that this was sprung on anyone is just incorrect. Okay. This is sprung on me, but I'll try to address each of the issues, or as many of them as I can. Gil, as far as the alcohol sales are included in that 700,000.
Okay, good.
At 2%.
Oh, they are included.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is based on all food and beverage, retail, ski rental, lift ticket sales on the mountain. So if you wanted to increase, we would have to go to, say, a 3, 4, or 5%. As far as representation and voting, I just want to point out that 95% of the annual operating budget would be the burden of Snowshoe to collect and pass on. Okay, so the annual budget is resort service fees. Snowshoe is the source of resort service fees. Okay? And when we went into this, there's no need for me for Snowshoe. By the way, there's always Inchwest Fortress thrown in front of this thing. Inchwest and Fortress, those are the stakeholders that I represent. They are not involved in this. This is me, Frank DeBerry, the president of Snowshoe, a person trying to work together with the community of homeowners at the mountain. This is not, a conglomerate trying to force something on the little guy. When I first brought the concept to my boss at Inchwest, he wanted to know why I would even bother doing it. Why would I go through the heartache of doing this? And I explained, that the fees are currently substandard. Increasing the fees is an additional burden on the homeowners, and that's currently the only other option under the structure. And that there is no community representation, and that I wanted to work in a way that, while not sacrificing Snowshoe's position within the community. In other words, we still are responsible for the $2.5 million MTA budget. We would be responsible for collection of 95% of the resort service fees. We need to have a strong seat at the board. We need to represent those interests. And I've not seen the proposed voting structure. It would be interesting to me to understand how you reconcile a property that has a renter being represented both by the owner of the property and by the renter of the property. I've not seen that, but we worked with both the House Political Subdivisions Committee to try to
I can give
reconcile
you the
that matter.
rationale. And the rationale is this: in looking at statistically the number of people that are renters up there, full-time renters, once they're factored into the equation, they're statistically insignificant, that it prevents a constitutional challenge. And once again, these are just recommendations. So in weighing it, you send something up, now you got a constitutional challenge, it stops everything, and you have a very small handful of people that are statistically insignificant in the outcome of the election.
But and again, that was addressed with the House Political Subdivisions Committee, and it creates a whole new constitutional challenge. How do you allow one property to have multiple representation? So so that that issue has been addressed for the past 2.5 years at this point. The petition process, which was called into question, is no different than the petition process that's being brought to you by the Fire Commission. It has precedent in the state of West Virginia. We followed the existing precedent. There was no magic or malintent behind any of that. Regarding the borrowing, we used existing precedent, and in fact, as the Commission's aware, we worked with the Bankers Commission to promise to address their concern over the cap, and I've offered up that while I can't pass a bylaw, I won't support a set of bylaws that permits any special assessment in the aggregate greater than the same restrictions that exist within a municipality. So again, following precedent. And Steve Farmer had pointed out when